Sidemen, obviously KSI's got his own product range when it comes to things like Prime. It involves him, a can of Coke and a transatlantic flight.
We all know MrBeast, and KSI employ big teams to make their content special.
They've got 35 people, they've got production facilities.
But who is their boss?
For me, it's a real luxury that that's my job.
In 2005, 3 PayPal employees started a video sharing site. They called it YouTube. In 2008, YouTube surpassed 100 million daily video views. And in 2012, the first video hit 1 billion views.
Oppan Gangnam Style.
While all this was going on, a YouTube superfan was working advising MI5 and the Foreign Office on their digital strategy.
I'm your new quartermaster.
You must be joking.
She got her dream job and joined YouTube in 2011, while creators like Annoying Orange and Ray William Johnson were taking over the homepage.
What's happening for him?
Then creators like MrBeast, KSI and iShowSpeed blew up. And that YouTube superfan? Well, she's now the managing director. Meet Alison Lomax, one of the most impressive and powerful women in UK media right now. And heads up, she's still a superfan. Are you excited about meeting MrBeast?
Very excited.
Stay to the end for the question sent in by a famous YouTuber.
And Max Fosh is obviously one of the UK's biggest prominent creators, wanting to know what you thought the impact of shorts would be on it.
Alison, welcome to Jimmy's Jobs of the Future.
Thank you, welcome to YouTube.
Oh, no, it's amazing to be here and kind of see it
It's
all.
going to be your permanent home now, isn't it? Camped out
We
here.
do quite
in the
like
studio.
it.
I wanted to just ask some sort of quick fire kind of
Go for
creative questions. So what was the last thing you watched on YouTube?
50 years of hip hop playlist. It's actually a big week in
right.
terms of 50 years of hip hop. It's
Yeah.
the anniversary and we're doing loads of events at YouTube this week. So we've got loads of great stars, people like Miss Dynamite, Wretch32, etc. Big events going on. And I was listening to the playlist all weekend.
And what was the thing that you watched last?
I watched Miss Dynamite and I
Okay.
hadn't seen that video. It was a real kind of like going back to sort of when I was a lot younger and ended up watching kind of loads of her old stuff. So I spent a bit of time, going into my music history yesterday.
And what's the creator that you kind of watch most frequwould you think?
Oh, well, that's hard. That's
I
like
know,
kind of
yes.
favourite child, which we definitely can't go into because there isn't one.
Yeah.
Is who would I say? So I'm loving. There's a creator called Hayley Morris who is a comedy sketch creator, but what's really smart about it is she does it all in shorts, so it's
Okay.
all in 60 seconds. So I find her absolutely hilarious. So I've been watching a lot of her. But it's a hard question because obviously I watch a huge amount of YouTube content.
And does it, because you are the MD of YouTube, is it a bit like a busman's holiday watching the content, or does it take the enjoyment out for you?
Not at all. No, it just gets better. It really does. Because for me, it's a real luxury that that's my job. You
Yeah.
know, my job is to watch a huge amount of content. And I'm just constantly finding new creators and new, producers and music artists.
How much are you watching a week? What's your watch hours?
What my watch hours?
What's your personal watch hours?
That's a great question. I mean, at least a couple of hours a day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what
So-
else is on in the Lomax household?
What else is on YouTube?
Yeah.
So we are we're a very creative. I say we're a very creative household. I live with creatives.
Yes.
So my husband is a film producer, so he watches a lot of archive content of film and TV, which we watch together. We listen to loads of podcasts and watch loads of podcasts on YouTube. My eldest daughter, I've got 2 daughters who are teenagers. My eldest daughter is very musical. She actually taught herself Bohemian Rhapsody on YouTube, having had no piano lessons. And we felt very guilty when she played Bohemian Rhapsody to the whole school. And the headmaster came up to me at a parents' evening after and went, "You've never paid for a piano lesson? Like, you are really bad parents." So we watch a lot of music with her. She's a huge fan of, Jake Collier and lots of other music artists. And then my youngest daughter is very into fashion and design. So she watches loads of fashion content. And I'd say that probably the thing that we all love and we all watch together the most is football content. So we're
Right.
big women's football fans.
Yes.
And we obviously, with this year's Women's World Cup, the broadcast rights with BBC and ITV, so we watch the live games. But then outside the 90 minutes, we watch a huge amount of the content on Sky Sports or DAZN or BBC ITV.
Because some of the women's players, particularly, are quite innovative with the behind-the-scenes stuff, right? Because the men's game is partly so professionalised, like none of that's really allowed to kind of take place. But with the women's game, there's a lot more happening on YouTube.
Exactly, there is, and we work with a number of them. So there's a footballer who you may know, she's Scottish, but she plays for Ireland, Rucha Littlejohn.
Mm-hmm.
So she hit the headlines actually by not shaking Caitlin Ford's hand during the Ireland-Australia match. But she has a channel called RuTube, which is absolutely hilarious. She's a fantastic creator and footballer. We've also worked quite a lot with Ella Toon. So she has Charlotte Tilbury Advertising, and she did a deal with Charlotte Tilbury on YouTube. So we work with a number of them, and they're great at doing the behind the scenes. And as you say, they're very innovative. They're sort of very up for trying new types of content. Jill Scott is another one, actually. She's obviously an ex-Lioness, but Jill Scott's Coffee Morning. She has a podcast. She has audiovisual content on YouTube as well.
What is the podcast is quite an interesting space for YouTube because it's somewhere you're kind of like moving much more into. Sort of explain the chronology of that.
Yes, and so what a lot of people don't realise is how big podcasts are already on YouTube.
Yeah.
So in the US, we've actually just launched a new podcast feature. So podcasts exist sort of in their own right, and you'll be pleased to hear that that's coming very soon to the UK as well. But regardless of that feature, podcasts in the US are the number 2 most watched podcasts, YouTube are, and number 1 for new podcast viewers. So very interesting for a Gen Z audience who sort of likes the audiovisual, the aesthetic value of YouTube and sort of seeing the content more. So there are some brilliant new Gen Z podcast creators. And obviously, you know, it plays to our strengths. You know, we are audiovisual, you know, we have a huge video archive. And but just by improving the features and the capabilities, the analytics, things like what you will experience is better analytics in YouTube Studio when it comes. So we just see huge potential.
What's the biggest misconception that people hold about the YouTube algorithm?
About the algorithm, I'm not sure there's necessarily a misconception. I would say it's more the word algorithm. The word algorithm, it's a very unhuman word, isn't it? Whereas actually, you know, when I think about the YouTube algorithm, it's the opposite, because what it gives you is it gives you your own YouTube experience, and I have my own YouTube experience. So it's an incredibly personalized viewing experience that it gives you, because it's obviously surfacing the content that you love and showing you more content that you love. And so it's got hugely positive connotations. So I think it's just the interpretation of the word.
And what advice would you give to creators that are looking to start out? Because it's one of these things that gets flagged up now that more and more children are looking to kind of be YouTubers, wanting to kind of be in that creator space. What's your advice to somebody just starting out on the journey?
Think about, it's all about, you know, what's the brand that you want to create? What's the content that you're passionate about? And how can you do that in your own really authentic way? And there's also a bit about experimentation, isn't it? You know, at the beginning, it's sort of getting your hands dirty and working out, looking at your analytics, seeing what's working, seeing, you know, where are the kind of peaks and troughs in terms of the content that people are looking at, really reading the comments as well. A lot of our creators say they get a huge amount of insights, which you probably do as well, from the comments that people write. So really using those and understanding what's working for your audience, and not being afraid to try different things as well. I mean, something that we know is very unique at YouTube is it's a multi-format platform. You know, we've talked about podcasts, we've got shorts. I'm sure we'll talk a bit more about shorts later, long form content, and also live as well. So, you know, it's an incredible creative playground. And so it's experimenting with the formats that work for you. You know, a number of creators are fully multi-format. There are others who might be very much shorts focused and more live, but it's understanding what works for you as a creator.
I love the phrase creative playground. That's great and a good way to sort of think about the different areas of it. What are the sort of challenges that you've seen? Because you've been at Google now sort of almost 12 years.
Yes, 12 years.
Like that's, so what changes have you seen? And I suppose what I'm sort of specifically coming after here slightly is that it used to be
much easier to kind of like gain followings and sort of just walk around with a camera and so on. It is now becoming a much more kind of professionalized platform of all the things that you've already talked about. So again, it's just that challenge for the person that's starting out as a hobbyist, really.
Yeah. And, you know, for YouTube, there are lots of different types of creators. There are still a number of creators, you know, who work as individual creators. There are others, you know, like yourself now. You know, when you started out, you talked about how you used to do it in between nap times. You know, you did it on your own. You now have a team.
Yeah.
And, you know, there are a number of creators who have big teams. You know, we talk about the Sidemen in our impact report, which I know we'll come on to talk about later on. They've got 35 people. They've got production facilities.
Yeah.
So it's still a platform that works for everyone, depending on what stage you are of your creator journey.
And I guess partly because we're at the earlier sort of side of our YouTube journey, when we put out a call for people, one of the questions I got more than any other was, why is 4,000 watch hours so high? Like, why can't that be lower? Was one of the questions that was asked.
And what would your view be?
My view would be having now run a business myself for 3 years, that there are more costs involved in a business than you anticipate. And so therefore, YouTube's got to make the margin somewhere. So that's my kind of reckoning on that side. And also, is YouTube wants you to put the effort in to get to the 4,000 watch hours to sort of demonstrate that you
commitment. I think also the learning. It's the learning and, you know, getting to a point where you are, as you say, more committed to it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's a great assessment.
There we are. So I've just answered my own question for everyone there. Or just Jimmy's YouTube advice.
Exactly. Jimmy's full-time home in a YouTube studio.
But give us some of the examples of, because the Sidemen are quite well known, but in the impact report, talk about these sort of 45,000 full-time equivalent jobs, right? That is massive. Like if that were a company that would be in the sort of top 20 in the UK, can you give us a breakdown or a bit of insight into what those 45,000 jobs looks like? Yeah,
no, that's a great question. Just stepping back, I think the first thing I want to say about the impact report and how proud we are of the numbers is that, you know, I'm a great believer of the UK in terms of, you know, how fantastic we have been for years in terms of the creative industries, you know, all the amazing talent that's come from the UK, the Beatles, Vivian Westwood, you know, you could go on forever. And so it's brilliant that YouTube is just such a big part of that, you know, and it's something that, you know, we're very passionate about, making sure that we support the UK creative economy and also, you know, we export our talent globally, which we've always done brilliantly. And so going back to your question about the 45,000 jobs, so they are a number of different types of jobs. They are the person in front of the camera, you know, the creative themselves. There are sound, you know, there are thumbnail designers, which are very specific to YouTube, makeup, costume, set designers. So, you know, it's an incredibly broad range of jobs. And then also talent managers. So the talent manager ecosystem has obviously grown enormously in the last, you know, 5 to 10 years as well, because YouTube creators, you know, you look at someone like Amelia de Molenberg, you know, she's on the red carpet of the Golden Globes, of the Barbie premiere, you know, and she is obviously she's a YouTuber. She came from her roots of the chicken shop days. So
give us the names of some companies. I guess what I'm thinking of is the 18, 19-year-old that's thinking, I love YouTube, but I don't really necessarily know which bit I want to specialize in yet. Where's the best place to kind of get an all-round work experience of that?
So work experience at YouTube.
Yes.
I meant more like. Understanding the ecosystem. Yeah. I'm going to have to say that, and I know that he's been a guest on here before, but Jordan Schwarzenberger, who, for those of you who are listening and watching, who don't know, he is the manager of Arcade Media. So he runs the Sidemen, who are a group of 7 men who met 10 years ago. Through their shared love of gaming, and as I mentioned earlier, they've now got 35 people who work for them. But Jordan is incredibly visionary about, you know, how to get into, you know, sort of YouTube creator influencer world and how to do it without necessarily having been to university or followed any of those sort of traditional routes.
Yes.
So I think, people like Jordan are an excellent, way of sort of understanding how to do that. And I know that companies like them, they do work experience, they do internships, etc.
It's amazing. And talk to us about the kind of stuff, because one of the interesting things about Sidemen now is they are creating their own products, right?
Yes.
So it's not just sort of the YouTube ad revenue and so on. How does YouTube look to support people doing that? And what do you see the future of those kind of ancillary products being?
Yeah. And it's something that, so when we talk about YouTube as a creative platform, we want YouTube to be the most rewarding platform creatively, emotionally, which means kind of like audience engagement, and also financially.
Yeah.
And financially is really, really important, because ultimately we want these creators to build businesses. And we know that we've got a very unique ad sharing model. The fact that 55% of the ad revenue that you make on your site, or 45% from shorts, goes to you. It's a very scaled model, and it's meant that we have paid back 50 billion over the last 3 years to artists, creators, and partners. So huge amounts of money have gone through, and I think a lot of people don't realise just quite how scaled that ad revenue model is. But there are also a number of other ways to make money through things like, super chat or membership channels, or, lots of other things. And then, as you mentioned, also there's the diversification. So someone like the Sidemen, obviously KSI has got his own product range when it comes to things like Prime. And the Sidemen, they've really branched out. They've gone into sort of food and beverages, haven't they? So Sides is their fried chicken pop-up, they're called ghost kitchens, I think they talk about. And also the premium vodka brand that they've launched as well. So I think it's a really interesting example of a brand that has built, so on YouTube alone, 18 million subscribers. They've got massive, massive audiences, and they've been able to diversify outside of, YouTube for ad revenue, which is substantial anyway.
And just bring us back to some of those key statistics about the UK. And when it comes to, you talked about some of the numbers there. What are the other things that are listed in the impact report, right? It's done via Oxford Economics, so it's all independent, etc. What are the other things that are striking numbers that are in there?
So the main other headline is really the 2 billion. So the fact that the YouTube creative ecosystem contributed in 2022 over 2 billion to GDP, so UK GDP, which again is another huge number. So it's the 2 billion and it's the over 45,000 jobs. They're the two most important headlines. The other fact, though, that I think is really interesting, and this goes back to the point earlier when I was talking about YouTube supporting and also exporting, is that over 85% of watch time from UK creators is outside of the UK. So that goes back to the point around, we're really creating these global brands.
Yeah.
The audience outside of the UK is absolutely huge.
And that is where the algorithm coming at it from our perspective is fascinating, right? In terms of like, you push these things out there and you post about it on your LinkedIn, Twitter, where almost all my followers are probably UK based. And then, you sort of see it take off in India and places like this. Like the algorithm does like extraordinary work in that sense, in terms of like finding these audiences for you. It's pretty staggering to kind of, to watch.
Yes, exactly. And it's phenomenal in terms of building global businesses and getting that sort of global brand recognition for creators.
How do you find the juxtaposition that you have to take in terms of being what I'm going to term YouTubey and then also being a corporate leader? So let me give you a case study of where I sort of struggled with this. So we made a video about doing this video. And it was just that we're getting you on and we'd like your questions, etc. Drop them in the comments. And Sunny, our digital producer, came back and said, right, the title's got to be YouTube exec reveals hidden truths about the algorithm or something. And I said, it can't be that, because, that's potentially going to annoy her, and we're going to put, that's not the way we need to go about it. And he was like, but that is what we need to do to be a success on YouTube. And I thought, gosh, that is interesting, and kind of sums up the problem that we slightly have as like trying to be quite a sort of corporate channel, quite corporate, versus being a success on YouTube. How do you find that positioning
As a leader?
Yeah.
So, I mean, the reality is that YouTube is, a huge business. So 96% of all UK adults visit YouTube every month.
Wow.
So it's huge. It's a huge business, and but it's also, you know, at the forefront of popular culture and zeitgeist and everything else. And, you know, but running huge businesses requires, you know, sort of the normal scale of business leadership and governance and everything else. And I would say, you know, that governance piece is really a really important part of YouTube's growth. And the example that I'd use there is really sort of the journey that we've been on as YouTube. So, you know, we had huge challenges 5 years ago in terms of brand safety, in terms of sort of, you know, our policies. And we've spent, you know, invested a huge amount of technology and time in ensuring that our policies are really good and really strong. And that's why we now feel that, you know, when it comes to the online safety pillar, it's something we've been preparing for years.
Yeah.
Now, this isn't something that's new for us. This is something that we have been preparing for, and we're very confident about the technology and the process and policies that we've got in place.
Yeah.
And so, you know, my job is absolutely to make sure that, you know, on the one hand, when it comes to this week, and I'm thinking about this week, you know, everything that we're doing around 50 years of hip hop. We've also got the Sidemen charity match on Saturday, which is a huge event and also being live streamed on YouTube. You're welcome to come. Yeah. You're all welcome to come. And then the other sort of, you know, big events this week is obviously government is back. And the online safety bill is still going through the Lords, and so it is in the Lords, and so, you know, my role, and I believe that I can do that, you know, very confidently, is to manage sort of both sides of the role. And
how do your hours kind of break down? Because there'll probably be some people watching thinking, "Oh, CEO of YouTube, all she does is watch YouTube." You say, as you said, you do a lot of that, but what else do you spend your time on as the leader of YouTube?
So yeah, I mean, a huge amount of my role is spending time with creators and partners and brands. It's also policymakers. You know, I mentioned the online safety bill. Like you too, I'm sure, you know, it's just, you know, spending time with the right policymakers, MPs, ministers, and also organisations around the creative ecosystem, whether that's BFI, you know, Creative UK. So they're all really important sort of stakeholders for us too. And then, you know, thinking about the sort of marketing and sales side as well. You know, as I mentioned, we're a big business now, and we've got, you know, fantastic partnerships with brands and advertisers. And so it's delivering against what their objectives are too.
And what is the sort of biggest misconception that policymakers hold about YouTube, do you think?
So very interestingly, we had a session recently with the Shadow Cabinet, and what was very reassuring was really how few misconceptions and challenges there were. Okay. You know, the questions were very curious, very intelligent, but there was nothing that was misconceptions. And I feel like going back to what I talked about sort of 5 years ago and challenges we had around brand safety, we don't have those misconceptions anymore.
And why do you think that's shifted so much in the 5 years? I mean, obviously you become much better at it as a company partly, but do you just think you're getting a greater kind of cultural understanding and becoming part of that cultural UK story?
Yes, exactly. I think that's a lot of it. I think we've worked, you know, when I talk about supporting the you know, the UK creative economy and industries, we work in partnership with a number of organisations, particularly the broadcasters. We work really closely with the BBC, ITV, Channel 4, Sky. And it's been fantastic to see the relationship and how that has developed over time. You know, I'll give you an example, something like the Brits. You know, ITV is the broadcast partner, and we live stream it globally. Also production companies like, you know, DAZN as well. So we have much more established partnerships in place, and it's something that we care very deeply about, making sure that we are complementary to the ecosystem. And I also just think in terms of content, you know, there is, you know, YouTube is an encyclopedia of UK culture and content, and, you know, looking at the growth in numbers, you know, I think about policymakers, they all spend a lot more time on YouTube now. And that's, you know, maybe watching some more mainstream content, or it's watching something very niche they're interested in. They're much more familiar with the content. And the final thing I would say is that they've also seen in their own areas the benefit of YouTube. So I'll give, for example, health as an example. And health is probably the vertical that surprised me most since I've started. And I remember in my first week so I've just been doing this job since January. I remember my first week we had a health summit. And I had no idea that there was a whole ecosystem of health creators who had all become YouTube creators during the pandemic. And they'd done that because their audience numbers were so restricted, patient numbers were so restricted, and they were also sort of really missing creativity. And so there are all these pediatricians, psychiatrists, nurses, GPs who've become YouTube creators.
Yeah.
And just feeling like the energy in the room and the amount of, good that they are doing, surfacing all of this fantastic health information. It's got something like 3 billion views in the UK alone, health information. Is really fantastic. So I think there's been a real benefit too from the sort of policy side of seeing the benefit for the areas that they work in.
And what other summits do you have coming up? I guess what I'm asking is, where do you see the big kind of growth areas? What are the verticals that people might not assume? Yeah, entertainment, an obvious one, but what are the other ones like health that might be coming up on the radar? Yeah,
so we tend to meet quite regularly in terms of across different verticals. So I'd say in the last couple of months, we've got another health summit this week, actually. We had gaming summit, sports summit, responsibility summit. So that's getting together all the cultural institutions, government departments, a lot of policymakers. A lot of them are becoming YouTube creators too now and doing collaborations also with creators. And so I'd say health is probably the most unusual one, but all the other ones you would expect.
More
yeah,
so.
Exactly.
Interestingly, on the gaming side, Netflix have entered into the kind of gaming industry where you actually play on Netflix. Do you see that as somewhere that YouTube might head in due course?
In terms of playing
through YouTube.
I loved how we both did that.
so retro, isn't it? Like the old.
So there are no current plans,
yeah.
But the gaming product is constantly iterating and evolving.
And
live is a huge part of gaming.
Because like you said, the Sidemen earlier, that's kind of where they started, and that's almost where YouTube got a lot of its growth 10 years ago.
Exactly.
Was streaming gaming. Right?
Exactly. I think also that it's the importance of getting communities together in person.
Yeah.
Because it's being a creator. It can be for some people quite lonely, if you are, and, our creators are all over the UK. So it's sort of a real reminder of the importance of getting a community together. And I would say that's something that I've been very focused on this year, of making sure that we get verticals together, but also that we are spending time out in different parts of the country, whether it's Brighton or Birmingham. You talked about Newcastle, or we actually had 2 events last week in Ireland, in Belfast, and also in Dublin. So we want to make sure that we're spending time in all of the areas where our creators are, because what's so amazing about YouTube is that there's just such a diverse range of creators who are based all over the countries. So it's making sure that we spend time with them and also getting them together and building their communities together.
100%. You talked about brands and partnerships earlier, and I think for consumer-facing brands, it's quite sort of easy to sort of stack up, right? You've got the views there, there's quite a lot of analytics that you can provide and so on. One of the interesting areas, which I think is kind of in its nascency, is sort of the B2B side of things, partly creating content, but also placing ads on as well. What do you see as the opportunity for business-to-business brands to get on YouTube and use it?
I think it's a basic, it's always goes back to basic marketing principles in terms of what's your brand and who's your audience and how can you best engage them on YouTube. And I'm actually part of an organisation called WACL, Women in Advertising Communications Leaders. So it's most sort of, sort of senior women. That sounds awful, most senior women. It's senior women in communications. And actually, we're in the process of building a YouTube channel.
Yeah.
And it's great to do it because we have a lot of content that is already exists on YouTube with our senior leaders who are speaking at events. So it doesn't always have to be creating new formats.
Yeah.
It's also curating. So what can you curate that exists already on YouTube? And so that's a sort of, a lot of content that exists anyway. And then what are the interesting formats that you can create?
I think that's one of the most interesting things, like the format creation across the piece, right? I mean, that's, Richard Osman, who's kind of become one of the biggest kind of creators in the UK, started out creating different game show formats and so on. That, to have created that and pitched a pilot to a production company 10, 15 years ago would have been a really difficult thing to do. Now, you could almost do it within a day and be recording the next day, right? It's incredible how sort of like how much that has changed that industry and that ability to get to a minimum viable product.
Yeah,
right?
it's incredible. So I mentioned my husband's a film producer. The first short film that he put together was about 20 years ago. It was called How to Tell When a Relationship is Over. I didn't take it personally.
God.
And what was fascinating was like he had a tape and he produced it and his friend wrote it. And they had this tape that they then sent off to places and didn't know if it had been received or who was watching it or whereas you think about, now if YouTube had been a thing around then, how different that would have been. They would have shot it, would have posted it, and then it would have been so much easier.
You've probably just done their shorts, wouldn't you, actually think
exactly so I know I always look back at that and just think how different the process is, that it was all reliant on physical tapes.
One of the things that we kind of put out a call for questions from people and so on, and Max Fosh is obviously one of the UK's biggest prominent creators, kind of talks about wanting to know what you thought the impact of shorts would be on it. I mean, that is something that has exploded in the last sort of 2-3 years. How do you see that changing the nature of YouTube?
Yeah, that's a great question. And for any of you who don't know Max, I would definitely spend time on his channel. He's absolutely hilarious. There's a very good video where he wanted to get Chad Hurley, who is one of the founders of YouTube, to subscribe to his channel. And I won't give the end away, but it involves him, a can of Coke, and a transatlantic flight, which is
we will link
very
to it
good.
In the comments
exactly,
below.
link to it. I'll put together a playlist. I can send you a playlist afterwards of all the various things that I've mentioned.
That would be great.
But Max, what was your question about shorts? Oh, so
Yes.
shorts. So I mentioned multiple format. Obviously, shorts is a newer part of our ecosystem, our multi-format ecosystem. And we're really pleased with the growth of it in terms of numbers and scale and uptake. And it's what's been interesting, actually, and I think I mentioned it earlier, is, there are some creators now who are shorts first.
Yeah.
So Woody and Kleiny, people like Hayley Morris, they are shorts first. And there are many others, though, who, like you use it more as a sort of a trailer. Yeah. So you use shorts as a trailer into your longer form content. And so for any creator, Max does shorts really well. It's just thinking about what's the role that it plays within the story that you're trying to tell.
Yeah.
And how to best deploy it.
And do you think that's an easier kind of way for people to kind of get into it? Because in a way, it's easier to create a sort of 40-second clip than a 40-minute interview.
Yeah, it's interesting, actually. I was talking to, there's a fantastic woman creator called Ichi Natori, who's lifestyle entertainment. She does a lot of beauty vlogging as well. And she was saying she finds shorts very hard. Yeah. She much prefers longer form, and she does some really long form videos. So she will talk for an hour. And she finds shorts very hard. So I think as a format, it's just dependent on you and your creative style and whether or not it works as part of your playground or it doesn't.
Yeah, I was quite sort of snobby about shorts in the beginning, just in terms of we're a serious business podcast. We do long form kind of entertainment, long form stuff. And actually being able to sum up a 45 hour long interview into 60 seconds is a real skill.
Yes.
And it was a skill that we were hammered at school about, actually being able to do that, about getting your point across quickly. And it is just amazing to see how it changes. How do you think streaming will change it? Because it's almost like, kind of almost going back to sort of linear television, really, in a way now, of people saying, well, I'm going to be online at 8:00. And it is just interesting how YouTube's kind of coming full circle.
Yeah, that's really interesting, actually. I think particularly in terms of podcasts.
Yeah.
So quite often on podcasts, you see that, don't you? You see, it's like every Sunday night or every Monday lunchtime. And so I see that more for podcasts than for other forms. And also actually for live, like some of the pay-per-view.
Yeah.
Obviously, like boxing, live and boxing is huge. There's the big sort of, KSI fight coming up in October as well, which is obviously appointment to view.
Yeah.
But I think particularly on podcasts, that's the other area. And I think it works well for that because you're sort of, you're used to thinking about when you want to tune into something.
Well, obviously, just talks about shorts being a big trend. One of the big trends across the world at the moment is AI. How is that going to change YouTube?
Yeah, it's a great question. And the first thing I would say is that AI has been a big part of YouTube for many years.
Yeah.
So we talked earlier about the recommendation algorithms and, the fact that we all see different content that we love. The fact that obviously a lot of our moderation is done through AI. So AI has been a big part of us. I think the inflection point that we're at is around what's it going to mean for generative AI.
Yeah.
And you may have seen that actually last week we announced partnership with the music industry.
Yeah.
So obviously the music industry is the industry that would probably experience the most deep fakes first. And, we want to ensure that we can partner really well with the music industry, which is why we came out announcing 3 principles of working with them. So the first was around partnership, the second was around content protection, and then the third was around scaling our trust and safety policies to ensure that they can also cover AI. And we believe that we're in a very strong position. We have content ID, so we have systems in place that we would look to, evolve. And we also announced an incubator with Universal Music. So we are partnering with them and a number of their artists, including Bjorn and Max Richter, to look at insights that we can get from an AI partnership. So I would say music is the first industry that we're really thinking about. We've got a number of announcements also that we're making later this year around AI. But I think the most important thing that I do want to say is that, we're very committed to embracing it in a bold way. We think it's really important. It's, it's going to be a big part of, the future. But the most critical thing is ensuring that we do it responsibly.
Yes.
And that's why doing it in partnership, we're very welcoming of regulation. We see regulation as being very important in the future of AI, but that also requires working very closely, not just with government, with different organizations, with academic facilities as well. It's, it needs to be a very deep cross-partnership.
And it's interesting how it often comes from music first, right? Like in terms of the whole kind of Napster
disruption, exactly. And I think that's why the music industry is so committed to leaning in now.
And why? And what's your kind of last week? It was just announced that Warner have announced the first AI artist, right, to join their stables. Like that's pretty incredible. Do you see that happening in YouTube in terms of there being just purely AI creators going forward?
Potentially. Yeah. I mean, I think what we're all experiencing now is, as I said, it's an inflection point. There's a huge amount of change and we're expecting that change in YouTube too. And we want to make sure that we have the right processes and policies and tools as well to set our creators up for success, which is what we'll be announcing later.
All right. Well, we might invite you back on now that we are at YouTube Music. If Alison Lomax were to start a channel, what would it be specialising in, do you think?
That's a great question. Do you know what? I think I'd have a podcast channel.
Yeah?
Yeah, I do. I love interviewing. I love interviewing people. I'd get you on. You could come, on my channel. I'm quite interested in like mid-form. So for podcasts, you get quite a lot of shorter form and longer form, but there's not much mid-form. Like there's sort of 10-minute lightning talks.
Yeah.
So I think I'd focus on that, and I'm sure it would be around something to do with diversity, leadership, pearls of wisdom, but I'd say podcast first.
And on that, let's talk about just careers at YouTube itself, right? We've talked a lot about the kind of ecosystem that surrounds it and so on, but we're here in the kind of London HQ. There's a lot of people who work here. Where are YouTube hiring most? Like, if you want to come and work at YouTube, what are the skills you're most looking for?
So we have so many different roles, and I actually did a careers fair recently, so I'm very committed to careers in schools.
Yeah.
And I think largely that's because when I was at school, it was like you were either a lawyer or an accountant. Yeah. And my dad said exactly the same thing. It's like you either be a lawyer or an accountant. And I felt like there wasn't enough education in schools, and I don't think there still is either. So I've done a huge amount of speaking at careers fairs over the last 5 years. And I did one actually a couple of months ago, and I took someone from my team who his career journey was he started as an apprentice at Sky. Sky have always been brilliant at apprenticeships. And he now runs a sports vertical at YouTube. And so what was fantastic is like talking to all these kids about the different types of jobs that there are, because it's anything from, you know, this guy who runs a sports vertical, has all relationships with all the sports partners, to running our relationships with creators, to working in engineering, to working in AI and, you know, product development on that side of things. You know, we have big music teams who work with artists and labels and business development and that side of things. And trust and safety teams as well. And then if you want to be a lawyer and accountant, you know, going back to, you can do that as well. So, and we have fantastic incredible lawyers and accountants and finance people.
So you talk about going into lots of schools and so on.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a lot of what we're trying to do at Jimmy's Jobs of the Future, right? Is taking people like Miles Jacobson, the CEO of Football Manager. Like, if you could take him into every sixth form and explain, these are the jobs that I need at Football Manager. Yes, it's computer programmers, but I also need people that can do English narrative and so on. It's exactly what we're trying to do, because I think that it's becoming harder for schools to keep up with the amount of jobs being created. They weren't very good at advising people necessarily how to become accountants, lawyers or medics 20 years ago when I was there, right? They're going to be even worse at it now with all these new jobs being created. And that's not sort of disrespecting the schools. It's just fact, right? It's enough to kind of teach people about the kind of subjects, doing careers as well. I just think it's really, really hard. And it's best hearing from people like yourself. So what do you say when you go into those schools?
So what I say is, so going back to the advice I had at school and from my dad was very difficult background, got a scholarship to school, got a scholarship to Cambridge and Stanford, and was an economist, did very well in his career, but instilled a very strong work ethic in me. He was adamant that I had to have a skill going to the workplace. Sadly, he died before I went into the workplace, and I didn't have a skill. My plan was to work for the public sector. I did a politics degree like you. I wanted to go and work for the public sector. But what was fascinating was that very early on, I found my skill because I was really drawn to technology. Yeah. And so my skill became digital. And digital didn't exist when I was at school. Google and YouTube were not around when I was at school. And so I couldn't have known how my career would have progressed because it didn't exist at the time. But I was always drawn to what I was interested in. So my first job working for the civil service, I worked in publications and digital media. That was then like CD-ROMs, dial-up internet. I mean, it was that like cranking, the cranking noise of like the internet sort of. And exactly. And it was that world which I could just see had so much potential in terms of how it was going to impact communication. And I really enjoyed doing something that was hard and hadn't been done before. But it was technology then and digital that became my skill. And so the advice that I give to anyone in schools or to my kids is just follow what you're interested in. You know, you don't necessarily have to have a plan, but know when to kind of zig and zag. You know, I know you've had Sarah Ellis on here before, Squiggly Careers. Amazing. You know, he's incredibly inspiring. I think particularly the younger generation, they're going to have much more portfolio careers. Yeah. And it's going to be much less linear than our parents or even our generation. And so, just follow what you're passionate about and make sure that you just throw yourself into all the opportunities, build your network, be tenacious. You know, so much of it is how you do it as opposed to what you do.
Do you think losing your dad earlier on in life in your kind of formative years, it did impact your career? How do you think it impacted your career?
I think I was very determined. You know, I was very determined to do well and to have a successful career. You know, I suppose you kind of want to make your parents proud, don't you? So, yeah. I
quite agree on that. Give us some examples of creators that you might not have mentioned yet. I mean, we've gone quite through the playlist that you'll create is quite a lot, but some other creators that we might not have heard of that you think are doing some really exciting things.
Dr. Becky.
Yes.
So she's an astrophysicist. She wants to make astrology accessible to everyone. And so I think her mission is like, remember how excited you were about astrology and stars when you were younger, to sort of like re-energize everyone around that. So she's got an amazing channel actually. And if you're interested in dark matter and supermoons and everything else. So she's very inspiring. I talked a little bit about health creators earlier. Dr. Simi, she is one of the amazing health creators, part of the community that we've we've built. And I remember the first time that I met her, what really struck me is she said, when I was studying medicine, all of the medicine books that I had white skin. So I didn't recognize my skin. And it made my job much harder when I was working with people who had different skin colors. And so a lot of her content is around, just diverse skin tones. They are, two additional ones.
Two additional ones we could check in the end. And the other thing I wanted to, just for your reflections as a careers kind of podcast and economy of the future, you talked about careers being less linear. Like you yourself took a year parenting break a few years ago.
I did last year.
Yeah, last year.
I came back in September. So the reason I took a year is because I've got two daughters who at the time were 16 and 12. My youngest daughter was her first year at secondary school, and my eldest daughter was doing her GCSEs. She was the year who'd had like a lot of challenges with homeschooling and were they going to do GCSEs or not. But the main reason was that my husband is a film producer and he was filming in Thailand for 9 months. And so he didn't come home for 8 months. He literally didn't set a foot in the door for 8 months.
Wow.
And so, the most important thing for me was to be a good parent.
Yeah.
And to make sure that my kids had a good education year and that we as a family still functioned well. We knew it was going to be really hard, my husband away for so long. And also what I would say is that it was just an amazing opportunity to sort of recharge. Being a leader during COVID was really hard. It was hard for everyone. But having a bit of time out. And I said to my team actually before I went off, I said, I'm not going to write a book. I'm not going to learn Mandarin. There is nothing. There isn't exactly. The podcast is not starting yet. This is about having time. It's about having time. And sometimes you need that time out. And I think the only thing I did learn, my dog had quite a lot of attention. So I did end up becoming slightly obsessed with dog training.
Yeah.
Sniffer dog training, agility training. At one stage I was going up, slides and through tunnels and all the rest of it. But other than that, I was just present and enjoyed it and loved it. And I would recommend to anyone, if they can, I know not everyone can financially, but if you are able to, to make the most of those opportunities to have time out and prioritise what's important.
You mentioned Simon Charity Match. I understand you're going for the first time on Saturday. Are you excited about meeting MrBeast?
Very excited about meeting so many YouTubers. But yeah, MrBeast will be playing. So it's incredible. They sold out like a 62,000 stadium in 90 minutes, which is phenomenal. And it will obviously be live streamed on YouTube as well for those of you who couldn't get into the stadium. But I can't wait, actually. I'm taking my kids as well, and they can't wait to. Are you a big fan?
I am. I think the Sidemen is brilliant. And I think what MrBeast is doing in terms of like changing production and so on is fascinating. And yet, one of the things that really interests me of what we try and do here partly is bridge that gap slightly between sort of traditional media and Westminster and so on. Because, MrBeast videos now get more coverage than... get more watches than the Super Bowl, for example, right? And you'll still get a lot of coverage of the Super Bowl in the kind of mainstream and like the ad breaks and so on, are all like the whole cultural thing around it. Yet more people are watching MrBeast. I spoke at a New Statesman conference alongside a YouTube creator. I asked how many people had heard of MrBeast, and I'd say it was less than half the room.
Oh, really? That's interesting.
And I just think I still think like it's interesting the gap's been closed and what you were talking about, the shadow cabinet, but I do think it's there's still quite a long way to go on that, and it is one of those things that we see in America, partly market size, but these creators are a bit more household name out there.
Yeah, no, I think that's really fair. Well, if you want to come on Saturday with Sonny or anyone else, then the invite is there.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Alison.
Thank you.